Gemar Chatima Tova. If you want to say Shana Tova, it's fine. Just as an aside, there's the reason why we say Gemar Chatima Tova on Yom Kippur as opposed to Shana Tova is because it is considered to be presumptuous, almost insulting, to say Shana Tova or L'Shana Tova Tikatevu in its fuller form. If we say that after Rosh Hashanah, then it is implying that on Rosh Hashanah you weren't already written for a good year, because there must have been something wrong with you. And I'm hoping that maybe by Yom Kippur you'll finally be written for good. And as you can see, that might be a little bit annoying. And so instead we say, Gemar Chatima Tova, may you be sealed for a good new year. I'm sure you were written for a good year, but just in case, I hope God signs off on that and everything will be good. Now that's easy for us to wrap our head around. The subtleties of the greetings and exchanges, the interpersonal communications, our wonderful monkey brains have evolved beautifully to handle those social interactions. Numbers, on the other hand, we're not so good at intuitively. Numbers confuse us and make us scared, and we make easy mistakes. As we stand, I know there's a few accountants in the room going, but I love numbers. And yes, you're weird. It's okay. and you are a mutant of evolution, and we need those mutations to help move us forward. You are a more advanced species than the rest of us, and God bless you for the work you do. But let me give you just a quick question. We are standing here in the aftermath of perhaps one of the most damaging hurricanes in Florida history, perhaps in our country's history. They'll have to wait until we adjust for inflation, whenever it stops needing that adjustment. And do we have a price tag yet for the damages? Do we have a rough estimate? 50 billion, right? Maybe 50 billion. 50 billion what? Dollars? So that means I could go and get $50 billion bills? What does that look like? I mean, that's more than 20, right? How do I conceptualize of that much money? The numbers don't make sense. If I try to equate it to something, how many bananas is that? My monkey brain would like to know, how many bananas would I get to eat every day if I had $50 billion worth of bananas? Way more than I could ever eat. In fact, literally, you could be pushing a banana in my mouth every second between now and when I died, which would probably be sooner rather than later under these circumstances. And you would not run out of bananas. In fact, you wouldn't even scratch the surface of the pile. We just can't fathom those numbers. And in all honesty, the 50 billion number is probably going to turn out to be rather low. So let's change from the numbers that are hard to the numbers that are easier. The fatalities, the life that has been lost. Now this is still a little bit hard for us to get a gauge on because we are waiting until we can properly assess all of those who did not evacuate, were not able to escape, who have died as secondary considerations or still in hospital holding on to life, but are yet, perhaps, God willing, hopefully not, but may pass away. It's hard for us to know. So let's go for a disaster that we have a nice firm number on. And something which is a little bit from my own past, although I wasn't there at the time, the Fukushima disaster in Japan, the Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster. How many people died in that? About 150. About 150. So, what was the response in Japan after the death of those 150 people from the offshore earthquake that caused the tsunami, which shut down the reactor because it was built where it shouldn't have been in the first place? What was the reaction in Japan? Turn them all off. Turn them all. You guys aren't up on your Japanese news? All right, so the government of Japan, in response to that disaster, turned off all of the other nuclear reactors. Now, that was a big deal in Japan because at least 30%, if not more, depending upon the time of year, of all of Japan's power came from the nuclear power plants in Japan. So, if you shut off your power from the nuclear power plants, what do? You have less power unless you fire up your natural gas plants. But if you fire up your natural gas plants in order to compensate for the nuclear power that you just switched off. What happens to the price of power? See, I told you we weren't very good on these math questions. What happens to the price of natural gas if Japan suddenly needs 30% of its energy to come from that and it didn't a week before? The price goes up. Thank you. If you didn't understand that, please talk to your money manager. Do not go in the stock market on your own. You are going to get taken to the cleaners. The price of natural gas went up. And Economics 101, if the price of natural gas goes up, what happens to people on fixed incomes? They can't buy as much, right? If now all of a sudden it costs 2 bananas, but I only have enough for 1 banana, then I'm not going to get the 2 bananas. That's basic economics. And what happens when you are in a fixed income situation, often elderly, and you are living in Japan, where, I will say from personal experience, many of the buildings are not designed for great heat insulation, and suddenly you cannot quite heat your home as much as you used to, and a cold Japanese winter comes through, you get sick. You get sick, right? The cold actually isn't good for old people. Welcome to Florida if you didn't know that. That's one of the reasons people have moved here. It's not just because of our wonderful hurricanes. It's because the cold actually does take a toll on the elderly if they're not able to properly insulate themselves, either by having very insulated homes or by having very good energy consumption to maintain heat in those homes. And how many people, from doing a survey of the deaths that happened in the year following the price hike, compared to the years when all of the power plants were still in operation, how many people died in Japan that probably wouldn't have died if they hadn't driven the price of power up? About 4,500. How many people died from the actual radiation? 150. How many died because of the spike in prices? 4,500. How many more people is that? A lot. Thank you, my fellow monkey brains. I know there are a few of you out there that are working out exactly what it is down to the decimal place, and again, God bless you. It's a lot. And that much our brain can begin to latch onto. 40,500 is a lot more than 150. But because those 4,500 died spread out over the months of winter and died from various diseases and illnesses and conditions that were exacerbated by the cold, it's harder to see them. They are not left behind in a radioactive wasteland next to a containment system that has failed, that has caught the entire world attention. They are just quietly dying out of the media's attention. And so the fact that the numbers tick up, we don't notice. Every year, approximately 1 million people die because of coal, because of the burning of coal. Do we notice this? Not so much, right? People die all the time. What's a few more who die 6 months early, a year early, 12 years early because of the various pollution and particulate matter that comes out of the coal plants and the different contaminants that are put into the environment around them? What's a few more? We don't notice them because they're not piled up in a huge heap in front of us that would allow our monkey brain to draw attention to it. They don't draw our attention because it's not a huge smoking ruin of a nuclear power plant that we can say, bad, and then respond to in a way that actually creates more harm than good under those circumstances. Our monkey brain is really, really tricky. Because when we try to comprehend these things, and we try to respond to them, and we try to plan and come up with a way to tackle these problems, we often misunderstand things completely. Again, in the Fukushima radiation zone, what do you do if you are Japan? How do you end this suffering? How do you measure this suffering and then bring it under control? How do you reclaim the towns that have been contaminated to go in and take all of the items that have been contaminated by the radiation worst in those areas, gather them up and dispose of them in ways that they will no longer be a contaminant to reclaim that territory? Who do you send in to do that? What poor schnook are you going to have go in and take care of these things? You get volunteers. Yeah. Japan has had volunteers, hundreds, thousands of them, willing to go in. What person is so stupid that they would walk into a radiation zone knowing that by doing so 10, 15, 20 years from now, they are probably going to get cancer? 80-year-olds. The advanced elderly in Japan have said, I'll go in. Give me the mop, give me the bucket, give me the lead box, and I'll gather things up. What's the radiation going to do? Kill me when I'm 120? I can do it. And when I do it, the land will be returned to a way that can be used by others within the community. Not today, not 10 years from now, 20 years maybe. But it will never get better unless someone goes in and do it. And why would you send somebody who was 20 in to do a job like that, knowing that you would be cutting their life short? I'll do it. Because that's something that our brain is able to grab a hold of. Our little mind, and I don't mean that insulting, we've all got them. Our little mind is able to say, I can do that. I can walk in there, and yeah, I'm probably going to get sick if I happen to live to be 120, but chances are I'm not going to live quite that long anyway. And by doing so, by picking up a little bit of the contamination, I will be improving that. And if enough of us do it, then it'll be as though the disaster never happened. That is the brilliance of our mind. We can't always see the big picture, the big numbers. We can't always count it, but we can see, I can do that. And that means that even if you were to look at somebody and say, this old person, he's 85 years old, and every day he gets up and he goes into a nuclear contamination zone, wearing a hazmat suit so he doesn't bring anything out that isn't in a containment, collecting the debris of this. The poor man, how must he suffer? How terrible that he is put in this position. I'll tell you, not all that suffer are victims. Not everyone who suffers is a victim. Sometimes people are choosing to put themselves in a place where they will exert themselves. They will be drained. They will be even perhaps harmed to some degree because they believe in what they are doing. If you were driving along a marathon and you saw someone sweating in the last, mile 19, would you pull up and offer them a lift? Is that what they would want? If somebody was on a weightlift regime and they were struggling to get that bar up, do you say, oh, here, let me help you, I'll get the other end? No, because you know that what they are doing is worthwhile for them, even though they are struggling, and honestly, I still don't understand marathon runners, suffering in the process. Because what they are doing is worthwhile. What those people in Japan are doing is worthwhile. And even though, yes, there is an element of suffering there, there is no victimhood. They have chosen to take this burden on. Because this they can see, this they can understand, this they can do. And that is what is amazing about our congregation. Because our congregation thinks in this way too. You look around and you see, a rabbi and a cantor leading services. Do you think that's how these services happen? Because the rabbi and the cantor get together and we make this happen? No. What the cantor and the rabbi do only happens because there have been scores of other people doing all sorts of other things you never thought about needing doing in order for this to happen. Because if the rabbi and the cantor had to do it, it wouldn't get done. Physically, it wouldn't be able for just two people to handle it. There are people who make phone calls, people who stuff envelopes, people who write emails, people who will pick up a little bit of the debris from Hurricane Ian, clean out a gutter here or there, maybe arrange for somebody to come in and take care of the water damage that was blown under our doors. You'll notice by the wall on the far side that we're still working on that. The people who will arrange for a youth event, buy the chips, buy the drinks for the men's poker night, arrange some flowers so that our bima will look beautiful, move the sidurim, move the machzorim, label a few of the chairs. These are all little things, but they're also huge things. No one person can run a synagogue, but all of us together can. No one person can do all that Judaism wants of us, not as an individual, not as a community. but together we can. See, this is the place where our brains should be working best. Sure, we can't fathom 50 billion, 100 billion. We can't fathom 1 million dead from coal. We can't fathom the scope of history and time, the reach of the universe, the images we're receiving from space. It's beyond our comprehension. But I can help you and you can help me. I can pick this up and move it over there, and that makes things better for the rest of us. That we understand. Now, you might have heard from those who do volunteer that it's kind of a pain in the tuchus, that our volunteers suffer. We are good at complaining, and I don't mean that exclusively at Temple Israel. That is a time-honored Jewish trait going all the way back to Avraham Avinu, to Abraham and Sarah Imenu, or Sarah, our mother. They were excellent complainers, both to each other as well as to God, and that tradition has continued to this day. So do you think then that our much used volunteers are victims of the congregation, are victims of the synagogue? No, not so much. Does that mean that we don't have to lend them a hand? Does that mean that they want to keep going the ultra marathon with no one actually offering them a lift in the car? No, because having an extra lift in Judaism is not like cheating in a marathon. The jobs are basically fixed in every synagogue of what needs to be done. You need people to make phone calls. You need people to help in the office. You need people to help in the school. You need people to help on the buildings and the grounds. You need people to help with each other at different times. And really, whether you have a 200-family synagogue or a 2,000-family synagogue, if you can imagine that number, most of those jobs don't scale up very fast. They're fairly fixed. Now, being a small-ish congregation, although I'll tell you some of my Christian colleagues think that our size congregation is a little big for their taste, but as far as Judaism goes, being a small-ish congregation, that means that we all have a higher percentage chance of needing to be involved in helping to make sure all of those things get done. That the volunteerism does fall on all of our shoulders, not only those who are retired, not only on those who don't have a full-time job, not only those whose, well, their kids are the ones benefiting, so of course they should be involved in running those programs because, you know, parents of school-age kids have nothing else to do in their life. No, the responsibility falls on all of our shoulders. Each one of us can pick up a small piece. Each one of us can do a small thing. It doesn't have to be the $50 billion solution. It doesn't have to be changing the entire system of how we run our power plants and then getting it wrong. It just has to be, I can pick up that trash. I can do that. You want help cleaning the gutters? Okay, I can do that. You want help with, cleaning and polishing? Sure. It's not a new job for me, but it's something I can give a couple hours for. Oh, we're doing a big mailing, so you need other people to help stuff the envelope so that way the office can take care of the other work and everything else can run smoothly in the meantime? Sure. I can do that. That is what makes Temple Israel Temple Israel. When I was at other congregations, it wasn't always that same way. Because oftentimes people will say, you know what? Worse than actually suffering as a volunteer is suffering volunteers, is dealing with volunteers. It's so much trouble. You got to organize people and call them, and then some people show up and other people don't show up, and then your plans fall out, and some people are late, and some people don't follow instructions. Better to do it myself. Actually, even better, let's just hire someone to do it instead. That has not been Temple Israel's path for at least around the last 20 years. And thank God it hasn't. Because it means that you recognize this is your congregation. This isn't my congregation. Don't get me wrong. I love this congregation. But my name is not on the deed for this building. My name is not on the registration as a nonprofit organization for the state of Florida. Your names are, collectively, the community of Temple Israel. Your names are here. When you are a member of Temple Israel, that means this is yours. And thankfully, for most of my experience here, that means that you have all stood up. I look around this room and I see so many faces that have helped with so many different programs, and please do not misunderstand, I'm not getting at any of you. And I'm not saying you haven't done enough, but I'm making sure you understand first and foremost why you did it, because it makes this congregation special, and why you did it, because it makes this congregation possible, and why you did it, because you did it out of love. You did it out of love. Even if you didn't know it or feel it at the time, you did it out of love. See, Judaism says there's many different ways that a person might be motivated to do something. They might be motivated out of fear. We talked about that a little bit in Rosh Hashanah, but this is the more dark variety. Oh, I'm afraid of being punished by the Almighty. I'm afraid of the shame that my community will heap upon me. I'm afraid that no one will associate with me, and then I won't be able to get my business done if I don't act the proper role in my community. I don't think most of us are too worried about those things. We're not too upset about lightning bolts coming down. Well, not in response to our sins, but maybe in response to the weather. Most of us probably feel that if somebody was giving us a hard time, we could walk out the door and never look back, and so what's going to happen? So fear is not such a motivator. So I can guarantee you, you didn't do what you did out of fear. The other is for power, respect, prestige. And yes, if you do a great deal, we have the honor and recognition that goes along with it, whether it be somebody who donates a great deal of money or donates a great deal of time, whether it be those who have worked so hard that they are honored during our Simchat Torah celebration, which Jeannie will talk about a little bit tomorrow. Yes, we give recognition. We have names, we have plaques, we have so much out there. But tell me, did that actually make your life what it is? Would you have never done it if you didn't get just the right amount of applause? If you didn't get just the size font that you actually wanted? You would have said it wasn't worthwhile? No. I know the people in this room, and I know the people who are on the live stream. Of course you would have. You might have been a little perturbed if you didn't feel properly respected, and granted you should be, because we do sometimes run from project to project so fast that we sometimes do not give proper acknowledgement and respect to all of those who worked on the last project that just finished. But does that mean in your heart of hearts you really would walk out the door if you didn't feel that you got the acclaim that was your just desserts? No, you're all better than that. You do it out of love, what we call lishma, for its own sake, because it is right, because it is proper, because you know it will do good for the others. Just like those who walk into the Fukushima zone to clean up, they don't do it because they want to be immortalized. They don't do it because they're afraid the government will punish them if they don't. They do it because they know it's right for their country and for their community. Coming to shul is not quite like coming into a radioactive contamination zone. But you do it for the same reason. You do it because it feels right, because you know this is where you belong, and you know this is where your actions matter. You may not be able to comprehend billions and billions. You may not be able to comprehend even millions or even thousands in a way that is truly intuitive, but you understand that each of you matters, and each action that you take matters in this congregation. There is no substitute for any one of you. We can't replace you with someone else who will do it just as well. Each of you is unique and essential for this community, and each person that continues to add their time, their efforts, their intelligence, creativity, their stubbornness sometimes, makes this congregation possible. That's something we were designed to understand. I hope you understand it too. It's very easy to get caught up in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as though it was almost a theater, almost performance. There in the pews, here the bima, the grand procession. Yes, it's beautiful and perhaps even awe-inspiring from time to time. But don't forget the simple truth that your brain already knows. You matter. The person next to you matters. And what you do matters. And this place is the result of all of that. And this year, please, you matter. Continue to help as you are. Continue to help as you can. Continue to be the lifeblood of this congregation. Gemar Chatima Tova.